All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Schmidt. I am the Senior Program Manager of Illinois Solar for All with the Illinois Power Agency. Just a few housekeeping rules off the top. To reduce any background noise, all participants have been muted upon entry. We will be taking questions from our audience towards the end, but you can still feel free to submit your questions at any time during the webinar. And to do that, all you need to do is just use the chat feature at the bottom of the Zoom window. Today's session is being recorded. A recorded version of this session will be available on the IPA website, and we will also provide a link to that on the Illinois Solar for All website. And also just a clarification, we will not be discussing anything regarding the currently filed long-term plan today. This is just about Illinois Solar for All evaluation. So some background information for everybody. According to Illinois statute, Illinois Solar for All must be independently evaluated by a third-party evaluator. The Illinois Power Agency conducted a competitive RFP process for our second round of evaluations for Illinois Solar for All, and ILLUM Incorporated was selected to conduct the annual program year reports as well as some more focused topic-specific reports. Today, ILLUM is conducting a stakeholder feedback session on their PY4 and PY5 program year reports, and that would be covering the program years covering 21 to 22 and 22 to 23. Since this is an independent evaluation, my role is mainly just to do introductions and facilitate the webinar. So I will turn it over to Malika from here.
All right, thanks, Jen, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Malika Jayaraman. I'm a managing consultant at ILLUM. And I think, as Jen mentioned, we're the independent evaluator for Illinois Solar for All. And I'm the project manager for this project. Just wanted to say we really appreciate everyone taking the time today to hear more about the evaluation research that our team has planned, as well as for providing your feedback. All right, so for our presentation today, we'll start with an overview of our role and planned approach on the Illinois Solar for All program. We'll also talk about our plan for engaging with this group and other interested parties, our planned research activities, the timeline, and our next steps. So Jen already kind of gave an overview of this, but I did want to just kind of give an overview of our team's role on this project. We're conducting an independent evaluation for the Illinois Solar for All program for the program years spanning 2021 through 2024. So this covers 3 total program years, and you'll probably hear our team refer to these interchangeably as the actual time frame that the year spanned, like 21 to 22, as well as the kind of year number that is in the overall Illinois Solar for All cycle. So PY4, PY5, and PY6. Our team's role is to review and report on the Solar for All program, as well as the performance of the third-party program administrator, Elevate. And then our team is also tasked with measuring objective criteria developed with input from stakeholders, which are summarized on the right-hand side of the slide here. So for our discussion today, we'll be focusing on our plans for PY4 or 21 to 22, which is the first program year we'll be evaluating. We'll also preview some of our plans for the 2022 to 2023 program year, or PY5, which we're also kind of in the process of starting to plan for. Generally speaking, we're planning a lighter touch approach for PY4 and more in-depth research on program years 5 and 6, just kind of due to the amount of time that has passed since the first program year, and then the timing of when changes to the Illinois Solar for All program resulting from the CEJA legislation were implemented, which is primarily in PY5. I also wanted to note that today we're looking for your input on the research plan itself. In other words, what questions we're planning to answer, what metrics we plan to measure, and how we're planning to. We're planning to speak to a variety of groups throughout the evaluation, including participants, approved vendors, grassroots educators, job trainers, job trainees, and stakeholders about their direct experience with the program. So just wanted to note that we do have like those more in-depth opportunities for feedback over the next several evaluation years. Finally, we've listed a few questions we'd like you to consider kind of throughout the presentation. These are whether there's anything from the 2021 to 2022 program year or PY4 that our team should keep in mind or research more in depth. Just understanding what questions or issues are top of mind for you for the study overall. And then it would also be really helpful to understand how you're planning to use the evaluation. This will, I think, help both inform what like metrics our team collects, as well as how we share that information out with you all. And then just reiterating Jen's note that this is really focused on the evaluation plan and not the long-term renewable resource procurement plan for this particular webinar. So ways to provide input. Again, I think as Jen mentioned, entering questions or comments into the chat throughout the presentation is a way that you can provide input kind of as questions or comments occur to you. We'll also have a 20-minute Q&A period at the end of this call. And then if something comes up after the webinar or you prefer to submit a written comment, all comments can be submitted to this ILSFA evaluation at illumadvising.com inbox. And the comments must be submitted by November 3rd, 2023 at 5 p.m. Central. And comments should include this particular subject line format in the email subject line. So diving into the evaluation itself, our team will be measuring a variety of program impacts and then conducting a process evaluation. We plan to measure impacts, including the impacts of the energy generated from the solar PV systems installed through this program, the impacts of those systems on participants' bills, the impacts on greenhouse gas emissions and other local pollutants, jobs created and monetary impacts of this program, and the social impacts of this program. And when we say social impacts, we're referring to the extent to which communities are directly benefiting from Illinois Solar for All investments. And our process evaluation will assess how effectively and efficiently the program is running, as well as providing context for the impact analysis. We did also want to introduce our subcontractor, Verdant Associates. You'll be hearing from them today and throughout the evaluation. Verdant is specifically working on the energy, environmental, and bill impacts analyses. So just wanted to note that you might be seeing their name as well in association with this evaluation. I did also want to give a quick overview of the individuals on our team. For the sake of time, I won't introduce everyone on this slide, but you'll be hearing from the folks whose photos are highlighted by these blue circles. And we have most of the rest of our team attending this call as well. And then similarly, this slide introduces members of the Verdant team that are on the call today. And you'll be hearing from Lauren later in the presentation. So this slide covers major events that occurred in program year 4, just kind of as a refresher for, what was happening in 21 to 22, since that program year concluded a while ago. So in June, the project submission window was open for the low income distributed generation and nonprofit public facility subprograms. The low income distributed generation program was not fully subscribed, and so a rolling submission window opened for that one also in June. In August, the final list of selected projects for nonprofit and public facilities was announced, and the community solar subprogram submission window opened with the final list of those community solar projects announced in October. And then finally, one of the notable events in PY4 was that CEJA made additional funding for projects available. And so the program was able to approve additional projects from the nonprofit and public facilities subprogram waitlists, and then also opened a rolling submission window for that nonprofit public facilities subprogram. And I should say the community solar program also subprogram had some projects come off the wait list that were able to be funded. So this table shows our proposed data collection activities for the whole evaluation. So you can see that we're planning less primary data collection in program year 4. We've already done some research with stakeholders, which my colleague Lee will get into a little bit more in a few slides. And we're also planning to do some research with job trainers to support our jobs and economic impact analysis. But in program years 5 and 6, we're planning to do much more extensive research, speaking to groups including approved vendors, participants, grassroots educators, and job trainees, in addition to those stakeholders and trainers. And again, as noted, I think on a previous slide, this just reflects the time that's passed since that program year 4. We know that it might be hard for folks to recall specific things that were happening multiple years ago with this program. And then we did really want to kind of focus our time and effort on capturing some of the more current program design elements which were implemented due to CEJA. So finally, in addition to producing annual evaluation reports focused on each program year, our team will also be producing mid-year reports focused on special topics. The purpose of these reports is to take a more in-depth look at topics we might not be able to cover in as much detail in the annual report. So the current mid-year report that we're working on focuses on customer and contractor barriers to participation in the small residential solar subprogram, and we anticipate delivering this report in November of 2023. Other proposed topics we're thinking about looking at in future years include customer bill impacts, particularly trying to leverage actual customer bills, which we don't anticipate will be available for the annual report. We've also discussed opportunities to look at, increasing community resilience through Illinois Solar for All and ways to simplify the income verification process. Other areas of topic or interest is definitely something we're curious to hear from you all if there are any ideas or topics you'd like us to consider. So definitely drop those into the chat if you have thoughts, or let us know during the Q&A period or the follow-up comment period. If there's anything you think should be considered for those mid-year reports. And with that, I'll hand things off to my colleague Lee to discuss our participatory evaluation approach.
Thanks, Malika. Hi, everyone. My name's Lee Michael, and I am a director at ILLUM. I'm leading the stakeholder engagement and social impacts work for this evaluation. If we go to the next slide. So first, I just want to briefly talk about what we mean by participatory evaluation. It's kind of as it sounds. So it's one where the priorities of the people and communities that are impacted by the Illinois Solar for All program are reflected in our evaluation. So stakeholder input is essential here. The goal that we really have is to make sure that stakeholder input is shaping and informing specific aspects of this evaluation. So over the summer, we interviewed individuals to help inform PY4 eval planning, and I'll talk about that briefly on the next slide. But we just want to acknowledge that, participation to help inform these evaluations is iterative, so there will be more opportunities to engage. So you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen this QR code. You can scan that with your smartphone, or I'll also drop a link in the chat as soon as I'm done with this section. If you'd like to engage and if you'd like to participate in those stakeholder efforts, it's just a short form that you can fill out your contact information and we'll reach out to you as future input efforts arise. Next slide, please. Okay, so like I mentioned, over the summer, we conducted 10 interviews with community stakeholders. And these were vendors, community-based organizations, and members of the Illinois Solar for All Advisory Committee. We conducted the interviews via Microsoft Teams, so online, and they lasted about 1 hour. Now I'm going to just provide a brief interview of the kind of top-level findings that emerged from those interviews, or the through lines that we saw across those interviews. First, we heard that Illinois Solar for All materials are not always accessible to individuals who do not speak English as their first language. We also heard that there was lower participation in smaller residential distributed generation projects. We heard some wariness about the legitimacy of the Illinois Solar for All customers among, the Illinois Solar for All program amongst customers, with some folks feeling maybe it was too good to be true. We heard about some struggles from vendors about some technical aspects of the program. So example, the portal. And then we also just heard a real interest in the results of this evaluation, so that folks were, curious to learn what we were going to find through here. So these findings are really informing specific questions that we're embedding in our evaluation to dig deeper and, uncover what some of these things may mean. Okay. So in the next section, we're going to talk through the evaluation plan for PY4, and I'm going to just kick us off with the social impacts aspect of the evaluation. So for this year, our primary research objectives are to identify the indicators that make up the Illinois Solar for All Environmental Justice Community, or EJC criterion, and to compare those to other state and federal level criterion that are being used to identify priority populations. And on the right side of this slide, you'll see a table, and this covers the 6 different criterion that we're going to review and compare to one another. Once we've done that, we're going to map how the Illinois Solar for All program participation overlays with these different priority population criteria, or these different ways that we can identify priority customers. And then through that, we're going to identify which geographic areas our team should prioritize to help define the social impacts that are meaningful to their communities for PY5 and 6 evaluations. So PY4 is really foundation setting and understanding the landscape. So if we go to the next slide. So I just talked through our key PY4 research activities, which are on the upper left-hand side of this slide, but I also just wanted to provide some context about where we're going with it. So, once we have this foundation set, we can work with those communities that we've identified to gather input on social impacts that are meaningful to their communities. And then we can conduct a data needs analysis. So that means find out what data we need to measure those social impacts, finalize the list of social impacts that we'll be measuring, and then measure and map those social impacts. And just to kind of spark folks' imagination, I included in the right box on the right-hand side of the slide some examples of different social impacts that we could analyze. So we could look at the proximity of jobs that are created to income eligible communities. We could look at changes in energy burden. We could look at reductions in total fixed expenses in households. We could look at increased access to electric transportation or increased access to energy efficiency programs. We could also look at things like changes in attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions among communities. And then finally, we can look at the longevity of program market effects. So jobs would be the primary mechanism to look at that. So our ask of you is to think about, what social impacts are meaningful to you or the communities that you serve. And you can feel free to drop things in the chat, or we can discuss it during the Q&A, or, if you sign up for the stakeholder input sessions using the QR code on the earlier slides, you could provide input that way. Okay, so next I'm going to hand it off to Lauren.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Lauren Robinson. I'm from Verdant Associates, and we're leading up the energy, environmental, and bill impacts here. So I'm going to talk about what's planned for PY4, starting out with energy impacts. So we're going to be focusing on 3 categories here for energy impacts: a project summary, just looking at the total number of projects, the capacity, the system cost per capacity of the projects. And then we will be reporting the energy impacts of these systems by simulating their PV production to come up with how much we would expect these systems to produce in a typical meteorological year. And then finally, for demand savings, we will be looking historically and to see what are the top peak load hours in MISO and PJM, and see within those top 100 hours, how much energy are the Illinois Solar for All projects simulated to produce during that time. So therefore seeing how much of the peak demand they are reducing through that solar production. And in the energy impacts, we will be reporting for two different groups of projects. One is the approved projects. So these are all the approved projects from PY4. But then we will also be reporting these metrics for all of the historical energized projects. So anything that was energized from PY1 through the end of PY4. So May 2022 will be included in that group as well to get more of a holistic view of the program. Next slide, please. We will then be looking at the bill impacts by taking the results of our energy simulations and doing an analysis to see how much customers' bills would be reduced from the produced energy. This is just going to be purely an estimate based off of a typical meteorological year of how much PV we would expect to be produced. This is not going to be based off of people's real bills or real usage data. So, that kind of research may come in a mid-year report, but it will be not part of the PY4 analysis. And then we will also be looking at our estimated bill savings and comparing it to project costs over time, looking at 20-year cash flows to see, how those are working against each other for holistically to save customers money. And this analysis will only be done for energized projects, but again, looking back through PY1 through PY4. Next slide. And then finally, for the environmental impacts, we will be estimating first year and lifetime avoided emissions of CO2, SO2, and NOx. We'll be using a number of different sources for these estimates from the EPA and the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, to come up with these estimates. We'll be doing this analysis for both the approved PY4 project list and the energized projects. But one of the questions we have for you is thinking about these, avoided emissions metrics we were coming up with. Is there any way to frame these environmental impacts or greenhouse gas savings that would be most impactful for you or you communities beyond, talking about CO2? Maybe it's, the number of cars, avoided driving or something like that. All right, next slide. I'll pass it along to Eileen.
Great, thank you. My name is Eileen Hannigan. I am serving as the executive in charge on this project, but today I'm going to talk about the jobs and economic impact portion of the evaluation. Our key research objectives for this part of the evaluation is to assess the impact of Solar for All on jobs and earnings in Illinois. And this includes kind of three different categories of impacts: direct impacts, such as those attributable to the construction of projects; indirect impacts, these are impacts from the solar supply chain; and induced impacts, such as impacts due to changes in local household spending. We will also be looking at how these impacts are distributed across the labor market and whether impacts differ by region within Illinois. And we'll be considering the training programs and how well they meet the needs of both approved vendors and the needs of the trainees. So some of the key metrics that we'll be reporting out on are the jobs and job opportunities created, economic benefits created, trainings performed, and we'll look at these metrics by subprogram and geography or region where possible. Next slide, please. Our approach will combine be a combination of some primary and secondary research. So we'll be leveraging secondary research using trusted research and industry sources. We will do some primary research through interviews with trainers in PY4. And we'll be talking to trainers who have had trainees that participated in projects and those who have not. And the secondary and primary research will inform how we develop inputs that we will be documenting thoroughly, that will go into the in-plan modeling software that will model the jobs and economic impacts. And then as we look ahead to PY5, we'll be doing some additional interviews and interviews or survey with trainees also. And now I will pass it on to Bahare.
Thank you, Eileen. Having a little bit difficulty getting unmuted. Hi, everybody. My name is Bahare Bambukol. I'm Senior Managing Consulting with Bloom. I will be leading the process evaluation portion of this research study. So process evaluation, as it's clear from its name, it's about understanding whether the program activities have been implemented as intended, and if the program is easy to participate from the perspective of participant and approved vendor. Some of the primary research activities that we have for PY4 process evaluation are understanding the roles and responsibility of program key actors, which are program implementer, approved vendor, grassroots educator, job training organization, understanding their effort and also how they work together. We will look into goals of Illinois Solar for our program for PY4 and whether the program actually achieved those stated goals. We will document program implementation successes and challenges for this specific program year and identify any part of the program processes that may be inefficient or confusing for potential participant and approved vendor and areas that can be improved. We will also document any changes and update to the program that happened in that program year 4 and provide a context for impact finding that our report will include. We heard from Laura and Louis and Eileen about all of the impact that will be included in our evaluation, and process evaluation provide the context on these impact reports. If we can please go to the next slide. Thank you. So evaluation research activity that we have planned for PY4, we reviewed program material, including website, approved vendor manuals, previous report, anything that we could get our hand on it. And also we reviewed the program data tracking, anything that's out there from PY4, and interviewed staff from IP and Elevate Energy. What we have in mind for PY4 process evaluation deliverable is diagram for PY4 process flows for all sub-program, documenting process evaluation finding, CJA impact, and in identification and recording of pain points and inefficiency, and also recommending areas of further research for future evaluation year, which was PY5 and PY6. On the right-hand side, I have some of the expected PY4 research activities. As Malika mentioned, PY4 is a light touch, but in PY5, we have survey, participant focus group, and interviewed plan as part of our process evaluation to talk to approved vendors, survey them, have participant focus group, and interview grassroots educator, and survey and interview job trainees. With that, we conclude the process evaluation portion of this webinar, and I will hand it back to you, Malika.
All right, thanks, Bahare. It does take a second to get unmuted. All right, so we just have a few wrap-up slides, and then we will move on to the Q&A period. I have seen some questions come through in the chat, and we are planning to answer those. So just wanted to note that we're going to be at that part of the discussion soon. So this slide just summarizes the timeline for the project overall. Currently, we're wrapping up this stakeholder webinar and evaluation plan task with this feedback session that we're currently conducting. And then we've also kind of started some work on the impact and process evaluation activities. We anticipate that a final report for program year 4 will be available in March of 2024, and we'll plan on doing kind of a similar webinar share out of results and kind of opportunity for feedback then. The slide covers next steps for the webinar. So a recording of this will be available on IPA's events page by tomorrow, November 1st. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we're collecting comments through this ILSFA evaluation at illumadvising.com inbox. I think earlier in the slide deck, the email address did not include the word evaluation. So just wanted to note that this is the correct email address on this slide, and I think that has also been dropped into the chat. And then finally, the results webinar and summary for the kind of results of this evaluation will be in March of next year. And so that brings us to the Q&A period. So I've summarized here questions posed on previous slides that we've asked you to consider, but please feel free to provide any thoughts you have on our planned research topics or questions. And I think we'll kind of take a combination of questions from the chat, as well as if anybody wants to raise their hand and speak, we can take questions that way as well.
Malika, just from reviewing it, it looks like our first questions came to Lee during her part of the presentation from Kim. Lee answered part of the question, which was how will you reach the people you wish to speak with, and will you be asking grassroots educators for potential contacts? Lee answered part of that, and Kim provided a second question asking about how does Illum connect with CBOs and form the focus groups. So if Lee wanted to answer that.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for your questions, Kim. So we'll use what we call a snowball recruitment effort, which really just means that we're talking to people that we have interviewed for recommendations on CBOs or other organizations that we should be talking to. So this is, in this case, we'd be asking program staff, grassroots educators, and stakeholders, like any folks who sign up using the QR code I had in the earlier slide, to share the names of CBOs that they think we should reach out to. And then for the focus groups, you know, we have a list of participants from the program, but we may also ask grassroots educators to share the focus group opportunity with their participant network.
Yeah, because if I may, can I respond?
Oh, yeah.
I think it would be great to, like, I know there was some problem with the last evaluator where the evaluator asked grassroots educators for names. So I understand there's sensitivity around just giving names, but I know of people who had great experience and people who did not have a great experience. So I think they would be a great source. I of course would have to get their okay first, but I could provide you with that.
Yeah, I think that that is really helpful, and definitely, you know, input that would be helpful for us. And I also appreciate you acknowledging the sensitivity around, you know, private information. But I think any context that we can have from your experiences actually, you know, working with participants will be really helpful for us.
Hi, thank you so much for putting this together. I was wondering if I could ask a question.
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know if you guys heard me. I might have missed this. What is the timeline for this eval to take place within the next, you know, couple of months or a year? Or considering this was 2021, I'm just wondering how that's going to play out. Thank you.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for the question. We are planning to wrap up the evaluation for 2021 to 2022 by March of 2024. So that will kind of be the conclusion of our first evaluation year. And then I think kind of looking into early next year, we will also try and get some planning underway for the subsequent evaluation year, so 2022 to 2023. Just wanting to make sure that we're reaching out to speak to with folks about their experience with that program year, kind of as close to when they participated or were involved with the program as possible.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It looks like our second question in the chat was also from Kim during Eileen's discussion on how is a training program identified as a Solar for All training program. It looks like Eileen did answer that in the chat, but I thought we'd give room in case we felt like we needed to answer that as well outside of the link provided.
Yeah, I would just, add that Solar for All maintains a list of approved training programs that are accessible online to folks who are interested in those programs.
And I would also add that if there's a question about our methodology of selecting those, section 15.2 of our approved vendor manual details the process that we have for selecting those and naming those.
Great. Were there any other questions in the chat that haven't been addressed?
No, I think they've all been addressed.
Okay. Any other questions from the group or comments or things that our team should be thinking about as we kind of get rolling on this year's research and start planning for program year 5?
So you're asking us, how do we intend to use the evaluation?
Yeah, that would, I guess if it's helpful to have additional context for that question. I think as we think about how to communicate things out, like, some of the environmental impacts and just kind of what different findings we're highlighting or metrics we're looking into, it's just helpful to understand if you're planning to share things with kind of the communities you work with or mostly to use them internally. I think that's just helpful to us to understand how to kind of communicate the information in a way that's most useful.
So I'm a grassroots educator as well as a policy creator and implementer. So I would hope that the evaluation could help us frame policy changes to improve the program. That's probably obvious, but I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, definitely. I guess if I could ask a follow-up question, are there like particular things you're considering in terms of like policy changes, like issues or questions that you have?
Oh. I don't know how to frame this exactly right now, but the program may need a complete overhaul, in my opinion. So,
yeah, this is,
you know.
sorry, just to jump in, I'd prefer if we didn't talk about specific policy change ideas, just because that might bleed over into the open docket on the long-term plan.
Got
But
it.
also it could influence the evaluators in advance, so.
Yeah, I guess my question was more related to I think to give like a concrete example, like, you know, one of the things we're looking at with the social impacts analysis is like the criteria that are used to define the participating communities, and that could that is something that could in theory like help inform how that criterion is selected. Not saying that it like will, but those are like results that could be used to make policy decisions. So I think the question is less like what policy decisions are we interested in, and more if there's like research or information that could help inform that.
Yeah, I think absolutely participants' experience with, I don't know if this is helpful, honestly, I'm not an evaluator, but participants' experience with income verification, something I see a real problem there. Participants' experience with the billing, right? Receiving 2 bills. And I'm sure you're already doing all this. Why? I think the AV experience is key to this evaluation, and why are more not participating? Why are they participating and dropping out? But I don't know if that's anything new to you. Yeah.
Definitely, I think helpful feedback to have those specific topics flagged though, so I appreciate that.
Participants' experience with waiting. Yeah, I mean, they might not think, I mean, directed questions would be, I don't, again, not an evaluator, but participants may not know what, like, anyway, I think those are great questions.
Definitely, thank you for that input. And it looks like we have somebody with a hand up, Amy.
Yep. Hale, thank you for providing this overview. Just one note, and we'll go back through the slides and see if there's other suggestions. And I can't just looking at the program year that you'll be evaluating, and it seems like an eternity ago now, just between everything. So I may be wrong on dates. But just a call out that the time period you're evaluating, I think it's worth looking at not only the trainees that came out of the program, but what training was done during that time period and before, given that there was a gap in funding to several of those training organizations, because there was, it was sort of in between FIJA and CJA as the legislation that provided the funding. So there may have been a gap. Again, I'm not knowing the answer to this, but just calling out that there may have been a gap in funding to actually conduct training, plus our blessed COVID time period. So I just like, as you're looking at trainees or the training programs, there's sort of those two external impacts that it may just be worth, that might have to provide some context of like what trainings happened and what trainees were available. So just wanted to call that out, but we'll take a look at some of the other questions as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great flag. And we really appreciate that. Especially as we think about the job trainer interviews. All right, any other, we're capturing all of these, so really appreciate the feedback. Is there anything else that's coming to mind for people on the call right now?
No additional activity in the chat, Rika.
Okay. I definitely want to give folks the time to kind of think of questions if they have any, but also if folks prefer to kind of move on with their days and submit comments via written feedback, or if everything looks good, also happy to wrap up if there's no further discussion that we want to have today. Maybe we'll give folks like a few more minutes.
Malika, would you be able to flip to the slide that talks about responding? Maybe
This
that
one?
might be, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Just so that folks have that available to take down if they need it.
for sure. I once again find myself in want of hold music. We have a suggestion in the chat related to communication of environmental impacts. That's definitely helpful for us to know. We saw in previous years that there was kind of a variety of ways that environmental impacts were communicated out. So it's definitely helpful to know what's useful and what feels less useful to you all. All right, well, if there are no other comments, again, I just wanted to reiterate that we really appreciate everyone's time and interest in kind of listening to this webinar today, understanding what our plans are. We definitely, really value your feedback. So appreciate all the feedback that was provided today. And if you have anything additional, please do email it to that inbox. And we'll make sure to respond to any comments that we get via that medium.
And I would just echo that. I want to thank ILUM for joining us today and presenting us their plan and providing the opportunity for you all to respond both in this webinar and in writing. And we're looking forward to seeing their work on the evaluation of our program. Just a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be posted to the IPA and Illinois Solar and announced through the Illinois Solar for All website as well. So that will be available by tomorrow. And with that, I guess we will wrap up. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.